A few months ago on this segment, I talked a bit about Weezer's full indulgence in a symphony that would normally signal an overindulgent mess within OK Human, but ironically enough, ended up okay enough because the lyrics were on brand. Sure, it was pretentious dadcore, but that was very Weezer. Its surprisingly alright execution sold me more on the idea of the band shifting to the other side of being a dadcore band by doing the teenage glory day reliving that was all over their very badly titled other album from 2021, Van Weezer. I should have known better, given this album was also being dropped amidst an era where Weezer is being prolific. Something that hasn't slowed this point, and is usually a signifier that the band aren't quite firing off on their most consistent cylinders. For every good idea the band may have been making, they sure have about 4 or 5 alongside it that aren't nearly as good. Van Weezer isn't necessarily the worst thing the band has dropped during a period of heavy releases, but it's also one that exemplifies some of the pitfalls of doing a lot of creative work at once, along with being a reminder that bands who are old and are running the sonic divergent gamut can fail at doing so. Its highs and lows do land it lower within their discography rankings, and I think I'd consider it their 11th best record. Why so low? Where to start? Well, actually, let's start with the guitar, considering the band was trying to emulate the wizardry of the late icon Eddie Van Halen, and they instead gave us a guitar that, while punchy, isn't even the best produced guitar sound in their discography. The album wants to conceptually pay homage, but it definitely feels more Weezer than Van in a lot of ways by the time this 30-minute spin reaches its end. Really, the shining moment where this concept hits its peak is sadly within the lead single, The End of the Game. Starting with a finger-tapping solo intro, its sounds within the verses adapt a different use of that Van Halen sound, with a tone that emulates the ideas on a record like 1984. That tone reaches a harmony that just sounds like stacks on stacks in the biggest way, but they blend it well with the very Weezer lyrical tapestry as River sings about the end of a relationship. Even if songs like the third single, The Beginning of the End, and the last single, All the Good Ones, have a finger-tapped solo, the rest of the song buries the Van until that moment, which is kind of disappointing, given the drums in particular could have hit that huge sound that I'd argue is just as iconic as the guitars of the band. The same could be said for the song One More Hit, a song where the drums are all about build within those verses, with that sinister lead that's equally as flat in the mix. Especially once the heavier bridge gets going, it sounds like the band's first attempt at a metal-inspired jam. The lyrics having their own touches of Weezer cringe don't necessarily do it any favors either. I made a point to harp about it in the alternate take review I did on this around the time it came out, but I still think it's insane that Blue Dream is like 40% Crazy Train. Wait a second. The hell, why are we getting Ozzy knockoffs on a Van Halen tribute record? With the solo that might be the worst on the album in its style. There are even a few songs on here where I think a moment like a shredderific solo could help send the song over the edge, like Sheila Can Do It, and I need some of that. I don't even really think they capture the 80s acoustic ballad sound on the closer Precious Metal Girl all that well. It just sounds like a half-assed attempt at a sonic concept that every respin just yields such a mediocre experience. While on the subject of Weezer fumbling an overall sonic idea, their now 12th best album, their self-titled Black Album, does such a bad job at being an edgier Weezer album that I gave it a redacted a few years ago that I think is a better culling of its broader ideas, even if it still doesn't necessarily fit the darker concept. It's still made for a more palatable, consistent experience, while also removing some of the real blemishes that hold back the initial record. Yeah, songs like Zombie Bastards, High as a Kite, and I'm Just Being Honest, along with Byzantine, even if that's kind of a hotter take, is better than anything on Van Weezer. Some of them still don't really fit that initial mission statement for the album. On top of that, songs like Piece of Cake and The Prince Who Wanted Everything are some of the worst songs the band has made in recent memory. I also think California Snow is just a shit, closer that's trying to sound trendy. It's a record that sounds directionless instead of one that's throwing some interesting genre curves in there. The group talked about taking breaks on this to work on other records like Pacific Daydream, and it shows. It's a big reason why I threw songs from it within the Black Album on my Redacted. Even in that breath, some other songs I included in the Redacted, like Too Many Thoughts in My Head and the lead single Can't Knock the Hustle, aren't amongst my favorite Weezer songs at the end of the day. They remind me of some of the other meddling pieces of Weezer's discography that'll usually crop up within other records of the Colors saga. The highs just don't save them from landing this record at this point in the ranking. With the 10th best album of their discography, Hurley, it's a point in their career where a group was trying to reestablish footing. They were coming off the heels of a real critical bomb and was hoping that an indie label would help them reestablish an idea of what a Weezer album even is. Even if the label was a popular one like Reprise, I'd say their sole outing together is still probably the most alright album in Weezer's discography. Considering what it's following and it sees them working with other songwriters again, it was a pretty big step up. It's got some real highs that I'd say are some personal faves of mine, like the huge opener Memories. It's a song that ironically kind of dropped at the perfect time for me, the summer after I graduated high school, and was a great way to end that summer, blasting that at max while moving for the umpteenth time in my life. The two-piece of Trainwrecks and Unspoken acting as back-to-back bangers drive into the middle of the record amped, and are two gems of the same quality as Memories. Even if its back end kind of shifts the tone a bit, it has some solid songs throughout, like the moody Runaway, whose cliffhanger gives way to the splash that sets off into the album's second single, Hang On. It's a great moment that helps keep the back half vibrant with its catchy, emotional gravitas. It's still a mid-career Weezer album though, and it's got some awkward writing as always. Where's My Sex would be clumsy enough on its own, but Rivers just doesn't sound all that comfortable on Smart Girls in my opinion. Sure, the latter's chorus erupts, the song itself just doesn't come together as well as the gravitas in Brave New World following it. It makes you wonder where the songwriter's contributions came. Some of those moments have a real Sonic Chameleon aspect to them that give Weezer an edge without necessarily diverging too far from Weezer's brand of sound. Hell, if I wanted, there's some B-side fodder that can make for a Redacted someday. Even if there are still some moments that are just alright, the lows aren't as low as the ones on Van Weezer. Something you could say came from the other cooks in the kitchen on that particular project at the end of the day. And I'd say from here, we've reached the end of this video, considering those are my thoughts on this slice of Weezer's discography with the context of Van Weezer thrown within it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I've got another one of these dropping next month amidst the spooky season that I hope you're excited for. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week depending on what I've got going on. I'm gonna go though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I'm Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lots of situations, and I'll see you another day! Hey! 当然だよな。